Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to explore this really surprising connection between, of all things, ancient theology and modern neuroscience. We're going to see how making the invisible world inside our brains visible has totally upended our understanding of one of the most fundamental human experiences out there, intimacy. So yeah, let's dive in.
I know, it sounds like the start of a really weird joke, right? You've got theologians on one side, people who built their lives around an invisible spiritual world. And on the other, you've got materialists who often say, look, if you can't prove it in a lab, it just doesn't exist. But what if I told you they actually shared a huge blind spot? A way of looking at the world that, funnily enough, limited both of their conclusions.
And that shared blind spot? Well, we can call it a materialist bias. It's this idea that truth is only what you can see, what you can measure, what's physically right there in front of you. And both of these groups, in their own completely different ways, were kind of stuck looking at the surface of things, and they were missing this much deeper story happening just out of sight.
Okay, so let's really unpack this idea of a shared blind spot. I mean, how on earth could two totally opposite worldviews land in a similar place when it came to something like human connection? Well, it all comes down to what they chose to focus on.
So here's the parallel. The early church fathers, now these guys obviously had a deep belief in the soul. But when it came to the body, they were what you might call biological literalists. They looked at the body and they saw a machine designed for one very visible purpose, making more people, procreation. And in a similar way, a really strict materialist looks at the universe and only trusts what they can prove in a test tube. You see, both were missing a really crucial invisible reality.
And this brings us right to the heart of it all, the visible world versus the invisible one. You know, the gap between what we thought we knew about intimacy based on what we could see and what science has now revealed is going on inside our own bodies, it's just staggering.
And wow, this table just lays the whole shift out perfectly. The old perspective, the one based on what's visible, the focus was on procreation. The key organs were, well, the genitalia. But neuroscience completely flips this on its head. Now the focus is on bonding. The primary organ is the brain. And the driver isn't just a divine command, it's this powerful cocktail of neurochemicals. Intimacy suddenly goes from being the secondary byproduct to a primary fundamental psychological need.
And this quote it nails it. The early thinkers, they weren't necessarily wrong, they were just limited. They were looking through a blurry telescope. They could see the planets, the children, but they just had no way of seeing the invisible gravity, the neurochemistry that holds that entire solar system together.
So now, let's pull back the curtain and take a look at that invisible force. Let's look at the modern science that finally revealed the gravity holding human relationships together, the brain's incredible, powerful chemical cocktail.
All right, so here's the big idea, the one that changes everything. The brain is the primary sex organ. Yes, the mechanics of intimacy are physical, but the experience, the bonding, the attachment, the actual meaning of it all, that whole thing is orchestrated entirely inside our neural pathways.
And here it is. This is the command center, the limbic system. This is that primal, emotional part of our brain. It's responsible for our memories, our feelings, our most powerful drives. This right here is where all the magic happens. It's where a physical act gets translated into a deep, lasting emotional bond. So how does the limbic system do this? It uses this very specific cocktail of chemicals. So you've got oxytocin, which you can think of as the cuddle hormone. It's released during physical touch, and it literally builds trust and emotional connection. Then you have dopamine. That's the reward chemical. It gives us that feeling of pleasure and makes us think, yeah, I want to do that again. And finally, you've got vasopressin, which acts like a commitment molecule, and it's directly linked to creating those long-term monogamous bonds.
Okay, so let's do a little thought experiment here. What if we could hop in a time machine, go back, and give these ancient theologians a crash course in modern neuroscience? How would their worldviews have changed?
Let's start with St. Augustine. He was famously just tormented by what he called concupiscence, this overwhelming sexual desire that he felt completely hijacked his rational mind. He saw it as a deep spiritual disorder, a fundamental flaw in human nature itself.
Now, can you imagine if Augustine saw a brain scan? He would have been absolutely fascinated. He could point to the limbic system overriding the rational prefrontal cortex and say, see, there it is. That's the physical proof of my struggle. But then, after learning about oxytocin, he might see it not just as a problem, but as a kind of grace, a biological tool actually designed to help stabilize the very marital union he championed. All right, now let's jump over to Thomas Aquinas, the great systematic thinker.
His big idea was something called teleology, this concept that everything in nature has a specific purpose, an end, and you can figure out that purpose by looking at its visible result.
So for Aquinas, the logic was pretty simple. The visible result of sex is children, so its primary purpose must be procreation. But if he knew that our brains were literally designed to produce chemicals that create a powerful unitive bond, he would have had to update his theory. He'd probably argue that this invisible bonding mechanism was designed for a co-equal purpose, to create a stable family unit for those children to grow up in.
So look, this isn't just some interesting history lesson. This massive shift from the visible to the invisible has really profound implications for how we navigate relationships, ethics, and love in our world today.
I mean, just look at this contrast. The whole conversation shifts. It goes from a focus on physical purity to one on neurological health. The harm isn't just about disobeying some external rule. It's about actually fragmenting our own built-in bonding processes. And the purpose expands from just being for babies to being for biological cohesion, the very glue that holds partnerships and families together.
Think of it like neurological Velcro. Seriously, every intimate encounter releases chemicals that are designed to glue your brain to another person's brain. So from your limbic system's point of view, there is no such thing as casual. And that intense, gut-wrenching pain from a breakup or from being ghosted, that's not just in your head. It's the very real biological pain of ripping that Velcro apart.
And this applies to long-term relationships too. Think about it. That huge fight that seems to be about the dishes or taking out the trash, so often it has nothing to do with the trash. It's what therapists call an attachment alarm. It's your brain's primal, deep-seated fear of disconnection from your partner, and it's triggering a full-on fight-or-flight response.
In fact, modern therapy now views a committed couple as essentially a single co-regulating biological unit. That means your nervous systems are literally intertwined. Just being in the same room as a trusted partner can physically lower your stress hormones, slow your heart rate. You are biologically designed to find safety in each other.
And you know, this kind of deep bonding, it isn't instant. The brain's journey from that initial dopamine-fueled lust phase to the deep, oxytocin-based attachment phase, that's a slow biological process. Building that secure neurological foundation, it doesn't take weeks or months. It takes years.
So we end on this question. If the science is right, if the most profound part of our connection with another person happens in this invisible, electrical, chemical world inside our brain, what does that mean for us? It really challenges us to think beyond just physical acts and to start considering the health of our attachments, the stewardship of our own bonding systems, and the profound biological reality of what it truly means to become one.